Like if you want to improve your health, focus on improving your health, not losing weight. Like it makes a lot of, it's kind of common sense, which is when you're immersed in the diet mentality, I think sometimes we lose sight of common sense. Um, but not everybody's a research person. So I don't think everybody needs that. And I think for a lot of people, it's just kind of helping validate their own lived experiences. Like when I started, for myself personally, when I started to kind of toy with the idea that diets don't work, it made sense to me because it had never worked for me. That was my experience. I had struggled so much of my life. So, for many people, like with a lot of my clients, I like to kind of, give it back to them in the way of just like, well, how is that working for you? And,
Yeah.
clearly if they found their way into our offices, it's usually not working so great.
I love that you have a foot in research and a foot in clinical. I saw recently, because you're very active on social media, that you were either pointing out or talking about an article that I think was in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism. And I think it had, for what us was not a surprising conclusion, but I think for the field that was reading this article was a surprising conclusion. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that research was really highlighting some of the risks of weight cycling, and that weight cycling is associated with increased risks of, several different health conditions. So that's something that's been shown before, the health impacts of weight cycling and also the health impacts of internalized weight bias. So, a lot of the things that we attribute to being in a larger body, we have to also look at what is the health impact for people who are in a larger body who have also been told to lose weight for most of their lives and who have gone through numerous periods of weight cycling and also have higher levels of internalized weight stigma. And a lot of the medical conditions that we associate with higher BMI are actually found to be associated with things like weight cycling and internalized weight bias.
We want to say that again loud and clear and slowly, right? So if I heard you, a lot of the ailments, the issues, the problems, even the medical sequela that we think we associate with being in a larger body is not from that, but more so because people have been up and down and up and down and up and down so many times. And if I extrapolate from that, um, it's better to just stay where you are, wherever that is. Just kind of stay kind of within a very small range of where you are rather than trying to chase the rabbit.
Yeah, I would say the research says that's a strong possibility. And, that when we can be at a stable weight and also have a healthier relationship with food, not be dealing with chronic stress that often happens when we're hating our body and trying to lose weight, that also has an impact on our body too. So I think that if we can kind of create more peace within ourselves, that goes a long way in terms of health.
Yeah. And I want to just one line it, which I know, Alexis, is your message is diets not only don't work, but they actually cause harm. And I think that's so important. Like in all the research that you are quoting and all the research in the study, it's not just that you're going to gain the weight back, it's actually going to do something bad. And we kind of need to get that in everybody's head because the whole world is saying, no, no, if you do these things, you're doing something good for yourself.
Well, I think our culture has embraced this thin at any cost mentality. And, I think that a lot of the times we see people doing really unhealthy things in an attempt to lose weight, thinking that if they can just lose weight, it doesn't really matter what they're doing, that's going to improve health. And I think that's a huge disservice that the kind of mainstream medical industry has done for our culture, for people.
So it's funny that you say this. So I know that all three of us, see patients and clients, right? And I'm wondering if you're experiencing the phenomenon that I'm experiencing, which is it took long enough to get people to the idea of, well, you know what? This wonderful body of mine, the body that has really produced miracles in so many ways, If I could be a friend to it, if I could be nicer to it, if I could love it, gee, wouldn't life be better, no matter what its size? And now we have those same people coming in saying, well, you know what? So listen, I tried that, and here's what I found out. Actually, I can just take a GLP-1 injectable for the rest of my life, and I don't have to do any of that because really, I mean, I appreciate the principles, and certainly the work has been worthwhile. But here's the thing. I can just finally be in the body I've wanted to be in, like, my whole life, and it looks like I'm just gonna be able to stay there. And now I wanna put out there something that Nina and I have said many, many times before, which is, above all, body autonomy. People get to do whatever they want. We have no judgments. But this is a really fascinating phenomenon that's occurring, and I'm wondering if it's something you're interacting with.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of it in my practice, and also I'm seeing a lot of it just on social media. Like, and I get it because body acceptance is a really hard journey. And I think that a lot of people have done a lot of work trying to get there. I find that with a lot of clients and just people in general that I talk to, like even if we've done a lot of work on body acceptance and healing from an eating disorder, especially, it's like the rational part of our brain accepts it. Like you said, like people agree with the principles. It's oftentimes very much like values aligned with ourselves. But there's still this really strong, deeply rooted emotional piece that wants to fit in, that wants to kind of be able to,
Belong.
yeah. Yeah, to be in that mold that society tells us that we're gonna be in and that there's so much messaging around that if you're thin, you're going to be healthier and more desirable, you're gonna be more accepted, more lovable. Like there's so much around it. And I get it. It's a very tempting, especially the marketing around the GLP-1s that tells us here, this thing that you've always wanted that we've kind of said you have to accept your body because there's no other way to get there. Now, like you said, people can just take this injection and lose weight. And I think my concern is that there's so much that we don't know about what's going to happen long term because, like you said, Jenny, like people are recommended to stay on these medications lifelong. I think that's something that people often don't really understand. Even the doctors that I'm seeing prescribe it are kind of telling people go on it for a few months, lose some weight, and then go off of it. And that is not the recommendation for how these medications work. They're supposed to be on it lifelong, oftentimes at higher doses. And there's just not a ton of research about what happens over the lifespan.
One of the things that you said around social media and the pressure of social media, because I on purpose go and see like what's the messaging around GLP-1s on social media? What's the messaging of dieting right now? Because that's what our clients are really hearing. But one of the things that I'm seeing so much in the GLP-1 world is everybody who's it's working for. But what am I seeing in my practice are the people who go, I tried it, it's not working. Now I don't even know what to do with myself when I'm hungry. I can't navigate my way around hunger and fullness. I've lost my cues, right? I'm feeling bad part of the week, right? There's a lot that we're not hearing in the rhetoric in our culture right now around GLP-1s because they're being touted as the be all, the answer, the gold star. But what we don't hear are the people who dropped out of the study, the people who it's not working for, the people who've tried 3 different ones, the people whose digestions are terrible, the people who have ended up in the hospital. Now, again, I'm going to come back to what Jenny and I always say. You can do whatever the heck you want with your body. That's body autonomy. It's your choice. But our perspective is eyes wide open.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also, the people who are developing eating disorders, being on these medications. I think that's something else that's often not talked about. And we're seeing a lot of folks developing very restrictive eating disorders that kind of go unnoticed or even applauded because they're losing weight.
Mostly applauded. Mostly applauded. Yeah, because the thinking is like, "Oh, isn't this great? Look how much control she has. Like, she leaves food over. Well, I hope she's leaving food over because she's not hungry anymore in a natural way, not because, well, the drug stops me from eating." Okay, well, whatever works, right? Alexis, I noticed in the title of your book, The Diet-Free Revolution, which is very excellent, by the way, that you made it a point to use in your subtitle radical self-acceptance. It's a wonderful term. Tell us what you mean by that. What does that embody?
So, radical self acceptance is the idea of accepting ourselves exactly as we are in this moment. And I think there's so much misunderstanding around acceptance. And I really like to clarify acceptance doesn't mean that you have to like yourself. It certainly doesn't mean you have to like the way that you look. It means that we are opening our eyes to the reality of things as they are in this current moment. So, radical self acceptance would be opening our eyes to the reality as we are in this moment and trying to find ways to move forward with compassion.
So, again, sort of even in terms of internal family systems, we talk about this concept of burdens, right? We have our own burdens that we're carrying, but we have these sort of what we call cultural burdens, right? Just like these beliefs, these inaccurate beliefs that gets passed down from person to person to person and generation to generation to generation. And to me, diet culture is an American cultural burden. And not just in America, obviously, but certainly in the US. Diet culture is a cultural burden that we are all living under.
We've made sure to spread it around the world, so it's now
That
not
yes,
just
luckily
American.
we have
Yeah.
shared. Yeah, I obviously that's sarcasm, but yeah, we've done a great job of sharing that. And there's like, I'm sure the research that they did like in Fiji years
Yep.
back that I'm
I
sure you
was
know
thinking
about.
about.
That's yeah. I mean, it's as soon as they introduced American television into Fiji, eating disorders went through the roof.
And Kim, I want to highlight what you just said. Diet culture is a cultural burden. And I feel like we could all have it like tattooed on our foreheads and written on our mirrors because we as women need to hear that over and over so that we don't go, oh gosh, what's my problem? Where am
Yes,
I at fault? How did
yes.
I go wrong? Wow, I am such a disappointment. Wow, I blew it again. No, let me just reiterate what you just said. Diet culture is a cultural burden. It's not just ours alone.
No, no, I could not have said that better myself, Nina. Thank you for that because it really is a belief that it just gets passed down and regenerated. I mean, as we all know, it just keeps regenerating in different ways. It's like whack-a-mole. Once we finally kind of get a handle on one thing, it pops up in a different way. But it really is this very sort of I mean, certainly folks who have kind of looked into this, diet culture started, in a racist culture and is built on that foundation. So it is, you know, creating this hierarchy of bodies, from, that's how it started, right? And so adding to that, this, patriarchal, it's always been, I always love to share the fact that the first Miss America pageant was in 1921, the year after women got the right to vote. That's not a coincidence, right?
Right, right, right.
No,
So
right.
women get any little bit of power
And
and
then they need to
boom.
get smaller, right. It goes right, it goes with the vote. It goes with the '60s
Exactly.
liberation, and then we had Twiggy, right? Every time we get big presence, bring power, whoop, you better have a small body.
Better exactly, you're absolutely right, and I remember my very first semester of grad school going to a presentation on eating disorders, and the psychologist said, "You know, men go to the gym to get bigger, women go to the gym to get smaller." And it was
Ouch.
like that very simple thing. I mean, that was in 1995 that I went to that, and it stuck with me for this long because, yeah, that says it all, doesn't it? I think one of the things that to me, IFS is incredibly helpful with is that a lot of people say, well, I know it up here, like pointing to my brain, but I don't feel it in here, like pointing to my heart, right? So I know that diet culture is bad up here, but in here, I'm still kind of living with that. Like I'm still buying into it and I can't let it go. And to me, this is where IFS is incredibly helpful because our parts have taken in this message at a very, very deep level, like really from day one, and even prior. For some people, like if you are, we kind of know, and not that I can speak to any of this hardly at all, but like the whole epigenetics, research, kind of showing that even trauma is passed down through genes and things like that. I think about, we are a body, in utero, right? We are developing a body in utero. And if your body isn't being tended to even in utero, you might have parts that develop with a belief of I'm not worth caring for.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And that's not to put a pressure
No.
on mothers who are carrying their fetuses. It's
Right.
really also about that there's this environment that, a baby is born into and is grown into, and some of it is passed down, we'll say
Absolutely.
genetically,
Yep.
but also because we embody the thoughts and behaviors of everything around us, and most specifically, our caregivers or the lack thereof,
That's right.
those we attach to, those we never got to attach to. So that's even just coming out of the gate.
Coming out of the gate. Yes, exactly, exactly, and there's no parent who can be 100% responsive to a kid. It's not possible, right? There's no malice with that. There's no, even the best of caregivers is not gonna be, "Oh, as soon as the baby's crying, as soon as they're hungry, as soon as" it's just not possible. So it makes total sense that we have parts that can pop up very young who are experiencing food scarcity, neglect, whatever, or at least, kind of having that experience. But certainly, and our caretakers are also carrying the burden of diet culture. Through no fault of their own. They didn't ask for it, we didn't ask for it, none of those things. But, so all of this starts really, really early, and our parts take in these messages, again, even from our culture. I think, they did research like decades ago. And there's been more research since, but like I think it starts at age, I want to say either 3 or 5 of kids, if they're shown pictures of kids with maybe a child with glasses and a child who is an amputee, a child who's blind, a child who's in a large body. And, who do you not want to be friends with? And more often than not, it's the child in the large body, right? We learn that incredibly, incredibly young, right? So all of that, there's very subtle messaging about that, and there is blatant messaging about that. And if you happen to have a caretaker who really, again, has been really impacted by that and might be really focused on their body and really focused on dieting, and again, we're not blaming anybody here, but if that was their experience and you're watching that, or you've been told, your body's too big, it needs to change, it needs like so, again, it's like best case scenario, you're just getting it from our culture, but that's still a terrible case scenario. This is the way we fit in. This is the way we're acceptable, right? So with IFS, we really talk about we have parts that are protective parts who are protecting parts that are what we call exiles. And those exiles are the ones that are really carrying what I call like the kind of the really heavy stuff, like the, feelings of shame, feelings of, grief, beliefs of I'm not good enough. We all have parts that are carrying that based on our experiences. And we develop parts kind of develop to protect those parts. And we do that in a number of like a gazillion different ways. But one way is certainly to try to change our body. If I can change my body and make it acceptable to what this culture says, and we all know what this culture says is acceptable and what's not. We don't even have to go into that, right? We all know, then I'll be good enough, then I'll be worthy. Except it doesn't work though, right? Like it really doesn't work. We've all had that experience of, well, I got down to this size that I thought was going to be the size and it wasn't the size, right? So,
There is no side, right?
yeah, yeah. So those parts, like we really, one of the things about IFS is to really look at everything as a part that is really trying to be helpful to you and has a very positive intent for you. But all of that is based on this culture that we're living in, right?
I wanna talk about this word you used, which is exiles, right?
Yes.
'Cause if you're not familiar with internal family systems or IFS, it sounds harsh. Like, who's being thrown off the island, right?
Right.
So
Right.
So can you explain a bit what you mean, by the terminology, the part that is in exile?
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that. So we have parts I don't know how Dick Schwartz is the psychologist who founded IFS. I'm not sure why he uses that term, except that what happens is we have parts, and exiles tend to be young parts because we're more easily traumatized when we're young. And if, so say you have a part that is carrying a lot of shame. If that's the part that's kind of running the show in through the course of your life, life is going to be hard, right? When we're leading with shame, when we're leading with I'm not good enough, when we're leading with, grief, life is really hard. So our system, in order to just keep going, kind of tries to exile is a harsh word, but tries to kind of push that part kind of down,
Mhm.
so that it doesn't get hurt again, right? So that it doesn't take over the system. Because we're not making our best decisions when we're coming from a place of shame and I'm not good enough, right? It's hard to be effective in life when we're coming from that place. So our system is kind of like, we got to lock these parts away and try to keep them as happy and kind of quiet as we can in order to just keep going. That's what we mean by exile. It is a harsh word. I hear what you're saying, but that's what we mean by that. Yeah.
One of the ways that I like to think about it is just what you say, lock it away. Like the parts that we'd be like, you know what? You go in the cabinet, you go in like a closet in our
Yeah,
room where we're
exactly.
putting stuff and we're like, I don't want to deal with this. Nope, in the closet, in the closet, in the closet. But then it takes some effort to keep that closet door shut. And so then what do we do to keep that door shut? Oh, food is a really great way to
Yes, it
keep that
is.
door shut and to not hear the pounding of the parts that are inside going, hello, I'm still here. And we're like, no, no. And then suddenly people open the closet and they're like, oh my gosh, like it's spilling out. It's so much.
Yeah.
Like you're naming, the ultimate cost is the loss of life. But even if you're alive, there's the cost of loss of living when your whole life is consumed by thoughts of body size and calories and what you're eating and how much movement you're doing and comparing. There's not space for anything else. Like it fills all of the space and all of the energy, and it's exhausting. And then what else is there room for? And for me, when I think this is where weight stigma shows up, is that my eating disorder really started when I was in a fat body, and over the course of it, I eventually was emaciated. And I always say to people, like, I had the same eating disorder when I was fat as I did when I was thin. But when I was fat, it was encouraged and congratulated. And then when I was emaciated, it was a panic of, she's going to die. But if somebody had known to respond that way when I was fat, maybe it would have prevented all that I went through from, eventually the many years of struggling.
Well, you're talking about the ultimate double message that everybody gets, right? Can't be too thin, can't be too rich. Yes, you can, probably on both counts. You can be. And, it's incredible to me that when you look at some of the surveys, the three things that people are the most afraid of, right? One is public speaking. Two is being fat. Three is death. I find that fascinating, that it's scarier to some people to be in a fat body than it is to die. And that is unfortunately what breeds some of the eating disorder, mortality statistics that we see. You say often, I think, in the things that you write, and Rachel, I have to say, you write so prolifically. I mean, it's so satisfying, and I use the word very pointedly. It's so satisfying to read some of the things and to hear some of the things that you post, because you capture the voice, you capture the issues so brilliantly and so comprehensively, and it's like I almost take a sigh of relief after I read and see some of the things that you write, and I'm sure so many others do.
It's validating to our experience of being in a culture that is both pressureful and then gaslighting us that it's not.
Yeah, one of the things that you've said, is dieting is not benign. That's always been true, but I'm wondering how that's received in our era of GLP-1s that aren't going anywhere. And I do want to say, as I always do, this is not an opportunity for me or anyone else to judge someone's choice to use them. Body autonomy is still trumps all, pardon the expression. But it's really about, the fact that dieting is not benign and it has so many sequelae. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about what you mean.
I'm glad that you're naming that this isn't about any one person's decision, that it is so understandable in this culture if somebody wants to pursue intentional weight loss, whether through a GLP-1 or other ways. The cost, though, the reason that it's not benign is because of all the things that we're talking about. It silences people. It makes their life focus solely on body size instead of all of the wonderful things about somebody. It gets in the way of connection. It gets in the way of being able to have joy. It gets in the way of pleasure. Like, there's so many things that it interferes with. And I don't think it's a coincidence that at the same time we are seeing GLP-1s and we're seeing so much more media attention focused on emaciation and thinness is also while we're seeing fascism take over and we're seeing people be silenced, because anytime, whether it's women or other marginalized groups, start to get power, the system, whether we're thinking patriarchy or misogyny or white supremacy, any of these systems respond by trying to stop that progress. And I think we're seeing that right now. It benefits these systems if we are focused on thinness and not on what's happening in the world. I think for many people who have eating disorder histories and then many people who are in fat bodies, movement is fraught. It's complicated. The messages about movement in the culture are harmful. There's this idea that movement is always a good thing and more movement is always better. And that's really harmful when you struggle with an eating disorder. And then movement spaces are typically held up as a place where people are trying to get smaller. So if you're fat and you're in a movement space, a lot of times the message and sort of the energy of the space is, we are trying to not look like you. And when I struggled with my eating disorder, I took a long time off of movement. It was really the only way I could heal my relationship with movement was to stop movement for a while. And when I was ready to get back into it, I was trying to think about what might I want to do. And the pandemic was starting. And so I was like, okay, well, it has to be something I can either do at home or outside. And a friend of mine happened to be getting a Peloton at the time. And I was like, well, I'll try it. I've never done spinning before, but maybe it will be fun. And I loved it. I really fell in love with it, which surprised me, but I really did. And the instructors are great, but one of my frustrations was none of them looked like me. There is one awesome plus size rowing instructor, Ash Pryor, who's great, but I have the bike and there's no fat bike instructors. And so I love the classes and I'm like, where is the body diversity? We need fat instructors. And I was like, well, this is something I could do and I love it. And I think anybody who's going to be in that role has to be ready to deal with all of the weight stigma that's going to come at them. And it felt like I was in a place in my own healing that that's something I would be able to handle and had support around. And so I started this campaign, which we'll see if it ever goes anywhere. But in the meantime, I'm having fun with it, and I still love my Peloton.
So great. Have they responded to you at all?
The only responses that I've gotten is that they're not hiring bike instructors right now.
There's something you said that I think is really worth us unpacking a little more, is that experience of people in larger bodies, that pressure to, and I'm putting this in air quotes, to exercise. And one thing I want to point to is your use of the word. I know we all use this word, but specifically using movement, because exercise comes with all this pressure of you're exercising to make something happen specifically. And there's this right way to exercise versus the natural nature of our bodies that move. They are actually designed with hinges and all sorts of amazing mechanisms that allow us to do that thing of moving. I want all of us to look for, or to unpack and bring out a little bit more the complex relationship that we're seeing in our clients with movement and why it's so hard for so many of us.
Yeah, it's so complicated. And I'm sure we've all experienced with clients saying, when they say something like, I did X, Y, or Z, whether it went for a walk or whatever it is, but that doesn't really, quote unquote, count. And I think that's what happens with this idea of exercise. It's like that some exercise is somehow some very specific set of things. And if it's not that, it doesn't count. And I think many people want to move their body in ways that feel good to them or ways that are aligned with what is available to them. And if we've got this set of rules of what movement is supposed to be or what the goals of movement are, then why are people going to really engage beyond diet culture, which is not why we want people engaged in movement? If they have support, then of course I would say getting a fat positive or health at every size therapist or coach that they can work with around it. I have found that for a lot of my clients, though, the key is that break from movement. Even if it's a short break, that there's this need to disentangle it all. And so when somebody's caught up in this, like movement is compensatory or is about weight loss, and they're still in that mindset, then there's kind of this constant idea of, if I stop moving, something horrible is going to happen. And I find a lot of my clients need to take that break and let whatever is going to happen. Nothing horrible is going to happen. Maybe you're going to gain weight, maybe you're not. We have no idea what's going to happen to your body, but we never know how somebody's body is going to change. But I find that once there's that break, then we can kind of rebuild the relationship with movement that is based more on something that is feeling good or like something that gives them more energy or that they're enjoying instead of something that's punitive. The other thing is we need to think about what movement are you doing. If you're trying to go running and you hate running, or you're going to a gym where all around the walls are, images of certain body sizes. That's, I think, the other thing is like, let's look at what are you even doing? Because if it's something you don't like, you're not going to like it. We're not trying to force anybody into liking something that they don't like. But I do think a lot of times the first step is needing to take a break.
People need to take a break to find their own joy again.
Isn't it interesting that there's so many images of people working out where the ultimate goal is to perspire, to sweat, right? Like, oh, I've accomplished something. Look at that. I've burned energy. Oh, look at that. Maybe I'm going to be even smaller as a result of what I just did. And yet there is shame around someone in a larger body that is sweating, as if that means something else. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know you've posted about that. Yeah.
Yes, it's always such an interesting one to me. These things that are just normal bodily functions that are either just seen as normal or actually held up as something positive in smaller bodied people and then pathologized in larger bodied people. And sweating is one of them.
Step or not to step?
To step or not to step? I'm sure this comes up with your clients all the time. I know it comes up with mine every
All the
single
time.
day. And it's important to say that there may or may not be just a few medical exceptions where a shift in your weight is something that one needs to know. But for the most part, it doesn't make sense that it's become part of just the routine. We need to know your blood pressure and your heart rate, by the way, your weight. They're not the same. And I anticipate that some who are listening are going to think we've lost our minds, and we haven't. Because think about your own relationship to when you step on a scale. Forget about a medical setting for the moment. Think about what it feels like when you step on the scale, if you do, in your own home. So either you're possibly weighing yourself every day, or you won't go near it, not because you have a position about it, but because you're afraid of it, right?
Mhm.
Or it has the potential to determine your entire self-worth in your mind.
Right. And Jenny, you know how we always talk about body autonomy, right? This is my body. I get to make choices. I get to decide what I want and what's going on for me and how I do body in this life. The scale to me fundamentally undermines body autonomy. Because here I am having this relationship with my body. I'm feeling whatever way. And then I step on the scale. I step on this mechanical device and I'm saying, here, you tell me how I feel about myself. And suddenly we've given up all agency.
And it's so interesting that it's very intergenerational. Both, work with folks that are certainly adolescent, adult, older, middle adult, older adult, and it's the same story.
Yeah.
Now, it's important to say this is a human phenomenon, but it's most definitely a female phenomenon. Of course, it's not to say that men don't, but
Right.
mostly women have been, trained to think that thinner is better, thinner is smarter, thinner is more disciplined,
Hmm.
thinner is prettier. It's just the way one wants to be. And why we're talking about this is that it also becomes, well, thinner is healthier. And that's really the heart of the matter.
It is, but it's thinner is healthier, but thinner, it's not. When I hear my clients talk, the external wording is, I want to be healthy. But underneath that is, why do I want to lose weight? Well, yes, because I want to be healthy, but also because of the promise of everything else that goes with, if my weight is down, if the scale shows that I have dropped weight, then somehow I am a better human. Somehow I am more worthy. Somehow people will love me more. Somehow I will have more success. And so we really have to look at, what are we asking the scale to tell us? And that's an important actual intervention that we can do before, if we're like, oh my gosh, I got to weigh myself. Well, exactly am I asking this metal thing to tell me? That I'm a good person, that I'm worthy of love, or that I'm a bad person? And then I should start restricting, and I should feel bad about myself because really I didn't literally measure up. Let me tell you a story. I started in with a new primary doctor. I go to her office. This is a true story. I go into her office and her medical assistant says, hop on the scale. I say, I don't weigh myself. She goes, no problem, which was to her credit.
By the way, that is a new development.
Yes.
I would say somewhere in the last 5 to 7 years, it's not that they got smart about health at every size and weight stigma. They figured out it's not worth the fight. And so
Right.
in many places, if you say that, they're like, okay, sure, all right, I won't
Right.
upset you, but at some point
Right.
they make you later. Yeah.
Absolutely. But then I saw the doctor and she looks at my file and she goes, so it says here you refuse to be weighed. And I said, that's correct. I don't believe that weight is a measure of my health. And she was like, yes, but what about? And then she started to hammer hard about all the ways that I would need to weigh myself. So one of the things she said, what if you have a heart issue? I was like, well, actually, if I have congestive heart failure and this is a concern, feel free to weigh me to make sure that my fluids are actually leaving my body in the way that they're supposed to. She was like, yes, but what about if you're going to surgery? And I was like, if I'm about to enter into surgery, please, we'll have that conversation and you can weigh me. But right now, I don't have congestive heart failure. We are not walking into surgery. I am just meeting you for the first time, and I have other health concerns I'd like to discuss with you. Now, that was not the greatest way to start a relationship with a new primary doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happens is that trying to stand up for what feels right for me, because one of the ways that and this conversation I've had for many years with different doctors, but one of the ways that I absolutely end the conversation with doctors that won't back up is I say, your prime directive is to do no harm. Me getting on a scale is going to do harm.
Mm-hmm.
It will kick up old issues I have around what that number means.
Right.
And then I will end up in a cycle of feeling like, am I okay?
How do they react to that?
Then they're like, well, once I'm now into the emotional, psychological realm, they usually are like, oh, okay.
They get scared.
Well, I have to write down that you refused. And I was like, be my guest. Again, is that how I want to have a relationship with a primary care doctor? No.
But you see, that's also a bigger story, right? They have to write down that you said no. Why? Because
Insurance.
if something ever happens, oh, it wasn't my fault. She wouldn't let me weigh her. As if that's going to have a very big impact on your case. Let's be clear. Again, what did you just say? If you know you're having a procedure and you're going to need anesthesia, then there's a good chance you need to be weighed because that's sort of what goes into the calculation, rightly or wrongly. If you've had a precipitous loss that you didn't have anything to do with, for sure, you want to have now a baseline and to see if that precipitous loss continues, and there should be curiosity about why there is that loss. Also, in the case of congestive heart failure, which I hope is not the case for anyone listening, your body can fill with fluid. So they need to see if that's what's happening. The other thing that I'm not sure we mentioned is when you go for a bone density DEXA scan, right? Apparently, it's part of the calculation, whether it should or not, that's not for us to say, but it is part of the calculation, right?
And that was something I didn't know. So when I went for my first DEXA scan, she was like, can you hop on the scale? And I was like, no.
Mm.
And she was like, I really need I need your weight. And I was like, but I don't weigh myself. And she was like, no, it's literally part of the calculation of how we do bone density.
There's another thing to say here. If you are someone who really gets affected by knowing the number, and we have to obviously give equal measure to those who must know the number, but if you are one of the ones who doesn't want to know the number, and then you have successfully in that medical setting made sure that you don't step on a scale, right? Please also be careful about when you do step on the scale for one of those conditions we just said, because if you don't want to know the number, you still don't have to know it, but they tend to plant it all over your portal, all over the paperwork that you leave with. So you have to sort of just be alert that that's what's going to happen and hope that either you don't see it if it affects you or that you can just see it and, let the number go.
Yeah. And I've heard that the stories around my clients saying, I don't want to know. You can weigh me, but I don't want to know. So then the medical assistant weighs, writes it down, turns the paper over, then the doctor comes in and goes, oh, it looks like you lost 5 pounds. Good for
Right.
you. And they're like, seriously? Seriously?
Even that statement you just made, you lost 5 pounds, good for you. That means you are good because you lost 5 pounds. Not,
Yes,
I wonder what that's about.
exactly.
Also, it's part of our culture, right? I mean, if you're going to a medical setting, we'll come back to that, and that is the first question you are asked, well, then you're led to believe, oh, I guess it's important. I really should know. Except for the cases that we've said, which is anesthesia, a DEXA scan for bone density, or if you have congestive heart failure, or something where you've had some precipitous weight loss, there really is no reason to weigh you. It's not the issue. There are other ways to see if your body's doing what it needs to do. And maybe that's through lab work, and maybe that's through an EKG, maybe that's through any number of different things. But weighing has such weight attached to it. It has so much
Mhm.
meaning
It
and
does.
just perpetuates diet culture in the worst way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. And it becomes the goal. And so my invitation is to inquire within yourself is what is my goal? Is my goal to feel agile? Is my goal to feel energetic? Is my goal to have more vitality in life, more mobility in life? Right? Because weight and the number on the scale and our sense of weight loss and all of that, those are false goals that the culture has given us as though that's going to give us everything that we really want. Let's go under the goal of what the number of the scale is. Let's go under the goal of weight loss and look at what's truly important to us. Let's get back to our values, not the value that a society has said this scale is really important. You'll buy the scale and then you'll buy the diet, and then you can contribute to the $72 billion diet industry. Yay, we got you.
Nina, I want to go back to a point that you made earlier before we end, which was about body autonomy. It's a phrase that's thrown around a lot, and I think it has a lot of importance. Certainly in the times in which we find ourselves right now, there are women that don't have body autonomy, especially where termination of pregnancies is concerned. But when we use the word body autonomy, what we're talking about is that if you stop for a moment, you do have the ability to make your own choices, whatever those are. If you decide, I want to go on a diet, God bless, go do that, and just stay curious about why. And think about, do I have a history of dieting? Have I dieted before? How has that turned out? How has it worked out? What's my up and down about that? And
Yep.
how do I get off that merry-go-round? How do I get off that roller coaster? Well, part of it we're suggesting is to step off the scale and just see if you can have the experience of being in your body, which allows you to address a hunger cue and address a satiety cue. And I'll tell you something, if you leave with nothing else today, eat what you want, but do it slowly. I promise you that when you eat slowly, there's no good food, bad food, unless you happen to be allergic to something. But if you eat slowly, you will come back to your own intuition, your own intuitive eating, your own hunger and satiety. Then you get to choose whether you want to address those cues or not. But that to me makes much more sense than hopping on the scale every day and having it ruin your day because of some meaning that you attach to it.
Yep. And there it is.